Hi everybody, it's Crystal. So today I'm going to show you how to crochet the shawl there that you saw in the picture. So as you can see, it's not a hard shawl to do. It does have putts made with entirely with puff stitches there, as you can see, and they're all kind of just kept in the line. See how they go down and they grow a bit there as they go. And then it has a puff stitch, kind of a puff stitch shell edging, I guess, on the bottom. So this particular shawl is about 60 inches from one side of the top to the other, and then from the top down to the bottom point it's about 24 inches. Okay, you can make yours bigger or smaller. That is completely up to you. It is a very, very gorgeous shawl. I think it's one of my favorites that I've seen in a while. The color red is absolutely stunning on it, but I think any color will look beautiful on it. All right, so why don't we go ahead and talk about the yarn and the hook. All right, set this beauty to the side here. Okay, so for this particular shawl, it was made with Yarn Art Rose Garden. So it's one of the gradient cakes. That's how you seen how it slowly gradiates in color. Now it's classified as a one weight, but I think it's more of like a 2-weight. You can use a 1-weight, a 2-weight, a 3-weight. It doesn't matter what weight that you use. You know, the shawl's going to turn out the same. But this is what I use. The entire cake with the border, I'm sorry, and I think it is there's 1,093 yards, and it's a 100% cotton. So that is the yarn that was used for that particular shawl, and the hook size is an H, which is a 5mm crochet hook. Now if you use a 1-weight or a 2-weight, I do recommend the H, which is a 5mm. If you decide to use a 3-weight and you want it to have nice drape, use a hook to a 1.5 size bigger than what the yarn calls for. Whatever yarn you're using, use a hook to a 1.5 size bigger, and it'll give it a better drape. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you with a different yarn that's not quite so fumbly for me. All right, so we're going to start with a slip stitch, a slip knot on our hook. Just like this. Okay, and then we're going to work a chain of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch to form a ring. So I like to put my middle finger there in between the hook and the chain and then slip stitch. That way I can keep the ring open there. Okay, now what we're going to do is chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and we are going to work a puff V stitch. So that's pretty much what this entire thing is made with, is puff V stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how the puffed V stitch is made. So we're going to yarn over and go into the loop, or into the ring, and we're going to draw up a loop, and we want to do that 4 times total. So that was number 1. Again, yarn over, go through the ring, draw up a loop, that's 2 times. Yarn over, go through, draw up a loop, that's 3 times. One more time, yarn over, go through the ring, draw up a loop, that's 4 times total, and you should have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 loops on your hook. We're going to yarn over and go through all 9 loops, just like that, and then we're going to work a chain of 2, 1, 2, and we're going to go back and we're going to do another puff through the ring. So we're going to yarn over, go through the ring, and draw up a loop. Again, that was 1 time. We need to do that 4 times. Again, yarn over, draw up a loop, that's 2, yarn over, drop a loop, that's 3, yarn over, drop a loop, that's 4, so that's 9 loops on our hook, yarn over and go through all 9 loops like that. And that is the puff V stitch right there. And then we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to go back in and do another puff V stitch in the ring again. So we're going to yarn over and do the puff V stitch again. So drop a loop 4 times, that's 1, yarn over, 2, yarn over, 3, yarn over, 4, 9 loops, yarn over and go through all 9, chain 2, again, 1 more puff, yarn over and draw up 4 times, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 loops, yarn over and go through all 9, and we're gonna just chain 1 there, just like that, to lock it. Now we can pull that tight there, and then later on we can sew that together more. All right, so that would complete row 1. So for row 2, we are going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and we're going to turn our work just like that. Now we are going to work in the chain 2 space of this puff right here, this very first puff, and we're going to work 2 puff stitches. So we're going to go in and we're going to drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop again 4 times, that's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, yarn over and go through all the loops like that. And then we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to do another puff in the same spot. So yarn over, drop a loop 4 times, that's 1, yarn over, go in, drop a loop, that's 2, yarn over, go into the same space, drop a loop, that's 3, 1 more time, yarn over, go into the same space, that's 4, 9 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through all 9 loops like that, chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to do 1 more puff in that same spot, so you might have to slide them over a bit to make room. So yarn over, go and drop a loop 4 times, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over and go through all the loops on your hook just like that, and then we are going to do a chain of 2, 1, 2, and then this next stitch right here, or this chain space right here, is going to be the point of the shawl, and we're going to put a puff V stitch into this spot. So we're going to do a puff into it, and then chain 2, go back into the same spot and do another puff, just like that. So that's your puff V stitch. Now we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work in this last chain spot what we worked right here. So we're going to work into this chain space, we're going to work a puff, chain 2, another puff, chain 2, and 1 more puff. just like that. Then we're going to chain 1 to lock, and that will end row 2. So here's the point of your shawl right there. So we're going to go ahead and start row 3 by chaining 3. 1, 2, 3, and turning our work. And we are going to puff V-stitch here into the chain 2 space, the first one. So there's a puff, chain 2, go back into the same spot and do another puff. Like that. And we're going to chain 2, and we are going to work a puffed V-stitch right here into this next puffed V-stitch. See it from the previous row? So there's one puff, chain 2, and another puff like that. And then we are going to chain 2. Now we're going to skip this chain space right here, and we're going to be working into the chain 2 space here of the point of the shawl. And what we're going to do is the same thing that we did down here. 3 puffs with a chain 2 in between them. So remember, skip this chain space and we go into the point of the shawl and we work a puff, chain 2, another puff, chain 2, and another puff. Like that. So that's still the point of our shawl. Now we're going to chain 2, and we're going to skip this chain space here because, as you can see, it's not a puff V stitch. We're only working in the chain spaces of the puff V stitches. So we need to make this side match this side. So we have to do the same thing right here that we did over here, which is a puff V stitch in each of these chain spaces with the chain 2 in between. So we're going to work the puff V stitch. Chain 2 and do another puff into that same spot. And you chain 2, and then we come over here to the next puff V stitch here on the end and work another puffed V stitch. Like this. Chain 2 and go back in and do another puff to finish out that puff V stitch. Like that, and chain 1 to lock. And that ends row 3. Alright, so now we're going to start row 4. We're going to chain 3 and turn our work. So in this first chain 2 space, we're going to do what we did right down here. It's going to be a puff, chain 2, puff, chain 2, and a puff, all into this chain 2 space. Sorry about these little hairs you're seeing. This is alpaca yarn, so there's little hairs hanging off of it. All right, so let's go into it and work a puff, chain 2, another puff, chain 2, and another puff. Just like that. Now we're going to chain 2, and in this next puff V-stitch right here, we're going to skip this chain space because it's not a puff V-stitch. See that? It's just an empty chain space. We need to come over here because we're keeping our puff V-stitches lined up, and put a puff V-stitch into this chain space. So a puff, chain 2, and a puff goes into this spot. So there's 1, chain 2, and another puff. Just like that. And then we're going to chain 2 again. And again, there is nothing here, no puff V-stitch or anything. So we're going to be skipping that spot, and we're going to be working here into the point of the shawl. So we're going to jump over here. Here's the point of the shawl, and we're going to work in this first chain 2 space, and we are going to work a puff V-stitch into this space. So a puff, a chain 2, and a puff. And I just lost that one. Let me do that again. So there's a puff, chain 2, and back into the same space, another puff. Then we're going to chain 2, and we're going to jump over here to the next puff V-stitch, which is right here, and we're going to work a puff V-stitch into it. So a puff, chain 2, and a puff. Just like that. So now that is this right here is the point of the poncho, or the shawl. So now we're going to do the same thing on this side that we just did over here. So we're going to skip this chain space here. We need to chain 2 after that last puff. Skip this chain space, and in this puff V-stitch here, we're going to do a puff V-stitch, the chain space of it. So a puff, chain 2, and a puff makes the puff V-stitch, chain 2, and then puff. Then we're going to chain 2 again. All right, and then we want to skip this chain space here, and in this last puff here, we're going to do the same thing that we did over here on the first one, which is a puff, chain 2, puff, chain 2, and puff. So we just go right into it, and that's what we're going to do. Chain 2, and then another puff. Chain 2, and another puff. And that, we're going to chain 1 and lock it. And that'll end row 4. Now, I know you might notice these chain 3 here, chain 3s. Those aren't anything. They don't count as anything. They're just turning chains, okay? So we don't count them as anything. So now we're going to start row 5. So rows 5, 6, and 7 are the repeat rows for the rest of the shawl. We'll just repeat rows 5, 6, and 7. All right. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start row 5 by chaining 3. 1, 2, and turning our work. So we're going to put in right here in the beginning, we're going to put a puff V-stitch into this spot and a puff V-stitch into the next chain 2 space. All right, that's how we're going to start it off. We're going to put a chain 2 in between. So we're going to jump over here to the next puff V-stitch. And put another. Chain 2. Just like that, and then we're going to chain 2. Now what we will do when we repeat for row 5 and when we repeat row 5 is we're gonna, remember, it's always about keeping our V-stitches lined up, okay, our puff V-stitches. So we'll put a puff V-stitch in each of the puff V-stitches until we get to our point up here, okay? So this is just a void, remember there's no puff here, so we're gonna skip this chain space, and this right here, the middle of this puff V-stitch, we're going to put a puff V-stitch. So a puff, chain 2 puff is our V-stitch. If I don't quit dropping them. Got butterfingers today. Then I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to jump over here to the next puff V-stitch. So this right here is just nothing, it's just kind of a void. So we come over here to our next puff V-stitch and we work a puff V-stitch into that space. And then we're going to chain 2, and we continue that until we get to this chain 2 space right here of the point of our shawl. Now normally this would be a void because there is no puff stitch, there is no puff V-stitch there, but since it's the center of our shawl, we're going to work a puff V-stitch into this spot. Like that, and then we're going to chain 2, and again we're going to work a puff V-stitch in each of the puff V-stitches here till we get to the end. Chain 2, jump to the next puff V-stitch. Remember this chain space here is just kind of a void. So here's our next puff V-stitch. Chain 2, and now we're here at the end, so we need to skip this puff V-stitch. Now we're going to do the same thing here that we did right over here. We're going to put a puff V-stitch here into this chain space, and then we're going to chain 2 and put a puff V-stitch here into the last chain space. We're going to chain 2, and come over here to this last chain space here, puff V-stitch into it. Like that, and we're going to chain 1 to lock. So that'll end at row 5, the first row of our repeat. Alright, so now we're going to start row 6, and we're going to start by chaining 3 and turning our work. Now into this first chain space here, we're going to work a puff, chain 2, puff, chain 2, puff, right here into this first space. It's 1 puff, chain 2, go back in, puff, chain 2, one more time, puff. Now we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work a puff V-stitch into each of the puff V-stitch from the previous row until we get up here to the point of our shawl. So right up here. All right. And we put a chain 2 in between them. Then we jump over here to the next puff V-stitch. And put a chain 2. And then we jump over here to the next puff V-stitch. That, and we're going to chain 2, and now we're at the center puff of our shawl right here. And what we're going to put in this space is the same thing that we put in the beginning. A puff, chain 2, puff, chain 2, and a puff into the center puff V-stitch of our shawl. So we go into it and we work our puff, chain 2, go back in and work another puff, chain 2, and one more time back in the same spot, another puff, and then we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to repeat working a puff V-stitch in each one of these chain spaces of the puff V-stitches until we get here to our last one. So we jump on over to the next one. We put a chain 2 in between them, and we jump over here to the next one, and we just repeat this until we get to our last puff. Chain 2, jump to the next one right here. chain 2, and at our last puff we're going to do the same thing we did on our first puff and the same thing we did at the point here. It's 1 puff, chain 2, 1 puff, chain 2, 1 puff, all into this final chain 2 space. And 1 more. Just like that, chain 1 to lock, and that's going to end a row 6. And if you look, you can see that the puffed V stitches are pretty well staying lined up as they are supposed to. They do increase here where you put the 3 puffs together, you know, on the ends every so many rows, and then at the top here. So why don't we go ahead and start row 7, which is the final row of the repeat. So we're going to chain 3, turn our work, and we're going to put a puff V stitch in each of these chain 2 spaces. So the first one, and we're going to chain 2 and go to the next one right here and put a puff V stitch. Then we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work our way up to the center here, up here to the point, by putting a puff V stitch in each one of these puff V stitches all the way up, and putting making sure you put a chain 2 in between them. Then chain 2 and jump over here to the next puff V stitch and do another. Chain 2, jump to the next one, do another, and you continue that. Then we're going to chain 2, and now we are at our center puff right here. And we're going to put a puffed V stitch here, chain of 2, and a puff V stitch here. Chain 2, and then we come over here and work another puff V stitch. Like that, chain 2, and if you look now at the point, this chain 2 space is the point of our shawl now. So we're just going to repeat what we did over here by putting a puff V stitch in each one of these chain 2 spaces with a chain 2 in between them until we get to the last puff here, and that's where I'll meet back up with you. Okay, coming to the end, you just put a puff V-stitch in each of these chain 2 spaces here. Chain 2 in between them. Here's the last chain space. Go and chain 1 to lock. So that's what you would do now, is you would repeat rows 5, 6, and 7 until you get to your desired size. And then you want to end on a row 5 repeat for the edging. So the shawl that you've seen has a total of 44 rows. Of course, you can do it a lot bigger if you want. It is a little bit smaller of a shawl with the 60-inch wingspan there, but you can do it as large or as small as you want. But remember, you want to end on a row 5 repeat. Since I just finished row 7, I will be repeating row 5 again for row 8. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat row 5 again by chaining 3 and turning my work. And I'm going to put a puff V-stitch in each of these 2 right here with a chain 2 in between them. Just like we did here. Puff V-stitches with a chain 2 in between them. Chain 2, and we come to the next one right here. This is a void. Remember, I'm just repeating row 5 now. It's 5, 6, and 7. And when you repeat row 5, at the beginning you see, here's row 5 down here, 6 and 7, and then we start row 5 again. Row 4 was a bit different here, but you still do the same thing for row 5. It's puff stitch, chain 2, puff stitch in each of the chain 2 spaces. So puff stitch, chain 2, puff stitch in each of these chain 2 spaces. All right, and then we continue along, chain 2, and we puff V-stitch in each one of these stitches until we get up here to the chain 2 spot of our point. Oops. Alright, so I've made it to the point of the shawl on my repeat of row 5. It's this chain 2 space here, remember? So we're going to chain 2 after that last puff V-stitch, and in this chain 2 space we're just going to put a puff V-stitch, and that will be the point of the shawl. I'm just repeating row 5. There we go, and that's the point of the shawl there. Now we're going to chain 2 and continue putting a puff V-stitch with the chain 2 in between them, and each of the puff V-stitches all the way down. Alright, so after you repeated rows 5 through 7 for as large as you want it to be, and you end on a row 5 repeat like I just did, we're going to go ahead and put this edge on it if you'd like. This puff edging here that you see. You don't have to, but if you want to, I'll show you how that's done real quick. It's pretty easy. We're going to do a chain of 3, turn our work. Now in this first puff right here, we're going to put a puff, chain 2, puff, chain 2, and a puff. So that's like 3 puffs there with the chain 2 in between them. That's going to go in the first space. Just like that. And then we are going to chain 2, and we're going to see this void that we never work in. We're going to single crochet into that, just like that. Now we're going to start doing the big puff shells. That's what I call them, puff shells, into each one of these puff V stitches. We're going to do 5 puffs with a chain 2 in between them, but we're going to chain 2 after this single crochet, like that. Then we're going to come up here and we're going to work 5 puffs into this spot with a chain 2 in between each one. So there's 1 puff. You might have to slide them over as you go. Remember, this is just an optional edging. You don't have to do it. There's 3, chain 2, it's 4, chain 2, 1 more, and there's 5. So that is the puff that we're going to put in between the puff V stitches, and then we're chain 2 after that one, and then this chain 2 void here that we never worked, we single crochet, then we chain 2, and then we go up to the next puff V stitch right here, and we do our 5 puffs again with the chain 2 in between them. This is what we're gonna, I think I did too many there. This is what we're gonna do all the way around our whole piece. Chain 2, so there's 1 puff, there's 2, chain 2, there's 3, chain 2. I'm going to slide mine over because it does get a little bit cramped there, like this. Hope I did enough there. That is 4, and 1 more makes 5, chain 2, and we single crochet into this chain space here, chain 2, and then we do our 5 puffs with a chain 2 in between, and we do that all the way up. So you got in every V stitch space, you get your 5 puffs with the chain 2, then you chain 2, single crochet, chain 2 and your 5 puffs, chain 2, single crochet, chain 2, 5 puffs, chain 2, single crochet. Your center one should be a 5 puffs, chain 2, 5 puffs, and we just do that all the way to the end. And then the last one, we just do the 3 puffs to match the first one, and then we just tie off. Now remember, it's not hard. It may seem like it's a little hard, but once you get the gist of it, it's actually very, very easy, and it's very, very pretty. So it's just keeping your puffs consistently lined up, as you can see. So they do grow a bit here at the top. You can see there's another row coming off here, a row coming off here, and they do grow a bit at the center, and be able to see where another row's come off here. That's it. I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and I hope that you enjoyed my tutorial. Now don't forget, if you make this, I'd really love to see a picture of it. You show me a picture on my Bagoday Crochet Facebook page or on Instagram. Either place is fine. I'd love to see it, see what color you chose and everything like that. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there so you don't miss out on any of my other crochet tutorials, and that like button if you enjoyed this. If you look below in the description box, there is a link to well over 1,000 crochet tutorials. You know, they're all free for you to enjoy, so please help yourself. And until next time, have a good day. Bye, everybody.